Hi everyone, it's me, a near-mint foil Stormcrow, and I'm here to talk to you today about Hazoret. Hazoret, as pictured in her debut card here, is one of the gods of Amonkhet. It's pretty cool to be a god, but not on this plane. You see, Hazoret, once upon a time, had four other mono-colored god pals looking after all the mortals of Amonkhet in their nice little city. Each god was responsible for a different virtue, as indicated in their titles. Together, they tested the mortals of the plane in 5 different trials to determine if they were worthy of the afterlife that awaited them. This was going great for the gods of Amonkhet, until one set later in Hours of Devastation, where Nicol shows up and kills all the gods of Amonkhet for use in his totally evil Nicol undead guy army. Oh no. However, during this invasion, one god managed to survive, and that was Hazoret. How did she survive? Hazoret is just built different. Now, she had earned the title of God Survivor of Amonkhet. Hazoret leaves the destroyed city and braves the hostile sands with her people in tow, vowing to always protect them instead of totally killing them because Nicol basically brainwashed her into doing that. It's a long story. But she's a good god now. And with that little bit of context out of the way, let's get into the actual card and its text, and then I'll be going into my own personal commander deck tech for this beautiful red goddess. Alright, first off, we have the cost. Like most of the gods of Amonkhet, Hazoret is pretty cheap considering her stat line and keywords, only costing you 4 mana. Next, we have her typing. Both legendary creature and god means she can be your commander, or not if you lack passion and dedication. God is also a more and more relevant creature type nowadays, but let's stay focused on just Hazoret. Hazoret has two decidedly pretty good keywords, that being indestructible and the ever-present haste, meaning she is both hard to kill and very, very fast. Not to mention, a 5/4 indestructible haste creature is pretty good for only 4 mana. Now, we have the biggest chunk of text in her text box, which is her God Clause. Like the gods of Theros block that want you to have a certain amount of devotion before they'll do any face smashing for you, Hazoret also has a God Clause she wants you to meet, and that is being Hellbent. Hazoret will only kill the unworthy on your behalf if you show her just how down bad you are. But notably, you can still have one card in your hand, so you're technically not actually a Hellbent. She's not that crazy. And finally, she has a relevant activated ability that allows you to meet her standards for attacking and blocking, while also burning away all your opponents one shock at a time. Alright, now let's get to the fun stuff. Welcome to my nest, where I build my commander decks, and in this portion, I will be going over every single card I have in this deck one at a time. I would script this section out, but I'm not going to because it would take forever and make me very sad. If you don't care to hear me explain this deck that I built, it'll be in the description for you to just like pilfer or whatever. I don't really care. Alright, now let's talk the deck as a whole. If you recall my video about building commander decks, you'll remember my 3 F's of deck building. Function, funny, and flavor. In terms of function, it's like maybe a 6. It's not that strong, but it can certainly hold its own. Funny. I would consider this deck to be relatively funny, considering the whole point is to absolutely demolish your own hand and start swinging away with Hazoret while on top deck mountain. And there are also some little combos and synergies that I would consider chuckle-worthy that we'll get into later. And finally, we have flavor. I decided to go for a pretty flavor-heavy approach in my deck building to show my undying loyalty to our Queen and God Survivor, in hopes that she'll one day go out with me. If a card seems bad, or you can think of a much better alternative, just figure it's in there for flavor reasons. You can take it out if you want. Alright, with the 3 F's out of the way, let's talk strategy. How are we going to win with this deck? Well, first, we have good old Red Burn. They'll die if you hit them enough with any variety of spells, but in Commander, it's a pretty flimsy strategy considering high life totals and 3 opponents and all that. So we have, to remedy this, we're going to dump our hand as fast as possible to get Hazoret online so we can beat absolute ass. With certain hands, this can happen as early as turn 3, but it usually averages about turn 4 or 5, so don't get your hopes up. We got to get rid of that hand before Hazoret can do work. And then next, we're going to kill all the unworthy, which is a fancy way of saying we're going to put those your opponent's creatures to the test, smack them around to determine if they're worthy, and that's basically using board wipes and other things to clear the way for Has-Been Hotel to start smacking cheeks. And as I mentioned, you can just go absolutely ham with Hazoret, which is basically our endgame with this deck, but Yeah, that's mainly the strategy. All right, now into the actual cards. We already discussed Hazoret, so and obviously she's over there to the left if you need to read her again. I'll spare you the reiteration though. Here's our mana base. It's 35 fucking basic mountains. It really speaks for itself. But Degadoodle, there are many good mono red lands you could put in the deck that would no. We're going to be on top deck mountain. We will be top decking only mountains. Silence, heretic. All right. Next, we have a silly little flavor package that I included. It's all of the red invocations from Amonkhet block. We're playing like almost all of them. They are as follows: Shatterstorm, 2 and 2 red, destroy all artifacts. They can't be regenerated. It's like Wrath of God, but for artifacts. Speaking of Wrath of God, but for things, it's Boil. It destroys all islands for the cost of 3 and a red. That's pretty cool. Blue players read it and weep, I guess. Blood Moon. Multicolored decks read it and weep, I guess. Non-basic lands are mountains. I don't feel bad. All my lands are mountains anyway. We have Chain Lightning, which is kind of like Lightning Bolt if your buddies could also Lightning Bolt. Who doesn't love that? Aggravated Assault is an enchantment that lets us get more attack phases and is a good mana sink for some cards that we'll be getting into later. And that clears up our red invocation package if you include Hazoret on the left there, which is also an invocation. And we are not running through the breach because it's totally pointless in this deck and pretty bad. I'll play bad cards for flavor reasons, but I will not stoop this low. Now we can get into the meat and potatoes of the deck. This is the exciting part. This is the part you've been waiting for. The creatures. Yeah, that's right. Let's get started. First, we got Burgi. Burgi, great in this deck. Both sides. She's a double-faced card. That front face, whenever you cast a spell, add red. We like to do that because we like to cast our spells. And that other part is pretty much completely irrelevant. The other side, the artifact, is a card that it's an artifact that lets you discard cards to impulse draw, meaning to exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you can play them that turn. It's impulse draw. You got to do it quickly. Discard a card to impulse draw the top 2. Great discard outlet in this deck. Both faces of Burgi are all-stars in this deck. Very similar effect, but a little bit different, is the Flip Urabrask from whatever set he was in. He's a 4/4 first strike. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, he deals 1 damage to target opponent, and you add a red. So very similar to Burgi, but only for instants and sorceries, which there are a lot of. He also has, if you cast 3 or more instant or sorceries in 1 turn, you can pay 1 red, which he will make himself, to exile him and bring him back as a saga, which I don't have the card text for because I forgot. But it's a pretty good saga. It does all things you would want to do in this deck anyway. Now we have Combat Celebrant. He's a 4/1 for a 2 and a red human warrior, and the exert mechanic comes up a couple times, so I'll explain that. It's basically when they attack, you can exert them, and if you do, they don't untap on your next untap step because they're sleepy tired. Combat Celebrant's exert effect is one of the better ones in that he makes another attack phase. It's great. It's cool. We like attack phases in this deck, as you'll soon find out. We have Glinthorn Buccaneer, which is basically just gas in this deck. He's a hasting 2/4. He has discard synergy, so whenever you discard a card, deals 1 to each opponent. If you have Hazoret on the field and you use her ability to discard a card, you basically bolt everyone at the table. It's great. And you can also, when he attacks, you can discard a card to draw a card. That is his other ability. Great card. Pretty good in any discard-focused deck. You have Glorybringer, 4/4 flying haste for 5. Good to curve out on. When he attacks, again, you can exert and deal 4 damage to target non-dragon creature an opponent controls. Clear up the field. Little bit of targeted removal. You love to see it. Good for commander. Harsh Mentor is he'll whittle down your opponents a little bit. 1 in a red. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land, it deals. If it's not a mana ability, it deals 2 damage to that player. So just whittle him down a little bit at a time. I like the little bird guy that's on his left over his left shoulder. That guy's cool. Here we have a newer card, so this isn't really a flavor card. This is just a very good card in this deck. Inti, Seneschal of the Sun from that Ixalan set. Whenever you attack, you can discard a card if you want to. You probably do. And then you get to put a 1/1 counter on an attacking creature, and it gains trample until end of turn. Super good to put that on Hazoret. Hazoret likes trample. And whenever you discard one or more cards, just whenever, you impulse draw the top card of your library. Exile it, you can play that card until your next end step. Absolutely fire card. Great card. 2 mana is almost too little for how good this card is. Then we have Jaxus, another great synergy card. You can pay 1, tap it, discard a card, create a token that's a copy of another target creature you control. There's a couple good targets in this deck, namely like Combat Celebrant, Glory Bringer is great. There's good targets. Gains haste. When this creature dies, draw a card. You're basically blitzing out creatures that are already on the field. And she herself has blitz, so you can cast it for 1 and a red. And she comes out. When this creature dies, draw a card. You get it. Lizard Blades. This is an equipment lizard creature that is 1/1 with double strike, or you can equip it to whoever, probably Hazoret, and give them double strike, which is always good to have on your commander when your main strategy is making your commander kill people. Now we have mono red, all-time classic card, big flavor card for this deck too. Neheb the Eternal. This is my guy. Man has Afflict 3, so whenever he becomes blocked, the defending player will lose 3 life. You're not avoiding the damage. He's also a 4/6, so he's pretty huge, pretty good stat line for a 5-mana creature. And that glorious text. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add red for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. You can untap with Neheb and Hazoret, draw the top card, even if it's a mountain. You just discard it to Hazoret. All that damage deals 2 damage to each opponent on your post-combat main phase. You're getting 6 mana for free on that next main phase to do whatever you want with, and there are some fun things to do with that. Now we have Ogrehead Helm, which is another equipment creature. This time it's a 2/2. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. So here's the thing, is discarding your hand really super good. Drawing 3 cards, not super great, because it does turn off Hazoret. You can't attack or block with Hazoret if you have 3 cards in your hand. But this or the equipped creature has to deal combat damage. So it's probably Hazoret. Anyway, you've already done your attack step. Drawing 3 cards after that point isn't so bad. There's another card that does this identical effect that you'll probably want to cast on your second main phase so you don't screw yourself out of playing or attacking and blocking with Hazoret. Here we have Sulfim, Mayhem Dominus. Non-combat damage sources you do to an opponent or their permanents deal double that damage, which is good because you'll be doing that quite often. And you can also pay 1 and 2 Phyrexian red to discard 2 cards, which you want to do, and put an indestructible counter on him to make another indestructible 5/4 for your opponents to deal with good text. It's this deck gets out of hand pretty quickly, but not too quickly. Like I said, it's only a 6. I ain't here trying to ruin anyone's day. Then we have Soulscar Mage, maybe the best 1-drop in the entire deck. He's a prowess 1/2, and if a source you control would deal non-combat damage, like I said, that non-combat damage is coming in clutch. You put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature instead, which is better, because those -1/-1 counters will stick around. They get around indestructible, and Blasphemous acting with this guy on the field feels fantastic. Oh, and it's only creatures opponent controls. Don't worry about your creatures. Your Hazoret's just chilling with Soulscar Mage. He'll probably die in the process. He dies to like Anger of the Gods and stuff, but like don't worry about it. Surly Badasaur is just value for discarding cards, which you'll be wanting to do a lot. Discard a creature, he gets a counter. Discard a land, you make a treasure. Discard a non-creature, non-land, and he can fight up to 1 target creature you don't control. He has to. Which is not so bad. He's good. He's almost removal, and he's a Badger Dinosaur, so he makes a cut. Like I said, like the Ogrehead Helm, here's Ox of Agonas. He costs 5 mana. When he enters battlefield, discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. Probably don't want to do that on your first main phase because you're trying to attack with Hazoret, but hey, you do you. He does have Escape, which is very good because you'll be wiping the board quite frequently, and he'll come back, he'll draw you more cards, he'll discard your hand, which pays off with a couple other things, and he escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it, helping that aggro strategy. A 5/3 ain't nothing to mess with for 2 mana. Urabrask, another Urabrask. This one is the Impulse Draw 1, so he costs 5 mana for a 4/4 with haste. At the beginning of your upkeep, you Impulse Draw the top card of your library, and then you just move to your draw step and draw your card. So you basically draw 2, but one of the cards you have to play that turn. And he also has the effect to make all your opponents, they don't draw cards anymore. Well, they can. They just don't draw their next card. Instead, they impulse draw it, meaning they pretty much have to play their draws right away. Otherwise, they'll leave at the end of turn, which is good. Good effect. And then finally, we have Wildfire Eternal, which is 3 and a red for an Afflict 4 guy. 1/4. So it's pretty tempting to let him through. But if he attacks and isn't blocked, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand without paying its mana cost. And let me tell you, there are some fun targets to resolve that with. We'll be getting into... Oh, actually, we have one more. Or probably a couple more. Avaricious Dragon, another deck all-star, is this 4/4 flyer. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. We don't worry about it, though, because at the beginning of our end step, we discard our hand. All you got to do is play one card or discard one card out of the 2 you draw to put Hazoret back online, and you have a 4/4 flying dragon. He's great. I love him. We have Battlefield Scavenger. I was way wrong, by the way. We have more cards to go through, of course. You can exert him as he attacks. Whenever you exert a creature, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Great. Good 2-drop. Blazing Rootwalla. He's a part of a little package in this deck. Little small package of madness cards. Things you can play when you discard them. And notably, his madness cost is literally nothing. So if you discard this little guy, he's going on the field. And he likes to be there because he can be a 3/1. Good attacker, good little guy, good lizard. Blood Rage Brawler. I think this is the actual last one. 2 mana for a 4/3. When Blood Rage Brawler enters the battlefield, discard a card. That's what you want to be doing anyway. He's a 4/3 for 2 mana. That's cheap. That's good. That's great. There we go. Yep, we are at the end. Now we are going into instants and sorceries. That was all the creatures in the deck. Here are the spells you'll be casting in this deck. First up, we have Vandal Blast. Barely needs explanation. Destroy target artifact you don't control, or overload it to destroy all the artifacts you don't control. That's just good text, no matter how you put it. Cathartic Reunion is part of this. I also have another... I have Tormenting Voice in this deck as well, because it's technically not card positive, which you don't really want to be card positive in this deck because you're trying to have an empty hand. But it does let you see more cards, which gives you more options to do more things. Like, yes, having 3 cards in your hand is not super awesome in this deck, but you can probably play them, or at the very least discard them, and it doesn't hurt to have more options. Crash Through. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Draw a card. It's a flavor card. You got Jeru and Sama on the same card. And Hazoret likes trample, as I said before. All there is to it. Distemper of the Blood is a good pump spell if you can discard it for badness. Just +2/+2 and trample to a creature until end of turn. Probably Hazoret. And we like madness. We like pump spells, and she likes trample. Okay, so this one's kind of a bomb. Remember when I said earlier that Neheb making all that mana and Wildfire Eternal free casting you spells would be a pretty good little combo you can do here. Yeah, you can drop Worldfire maybe a little bit earlier than you should, and it seems like a pretty bad deal. But think about it. You're the mono red deck at the table. Who's the most likely to draw into, or even impulse draw, mind you, some quick damage to finish off your opponents after Worldfire resolves? If you don't know, exile all permanents, exile all cards from all hands and graveyards. Everyone's life total becomes 1. The optimal finisher is to just, after this, hit him within the festivities. If this is impulse draw, like you have the Worldfire in your hand, you have a Neheb and you hit for like 15, you make 15 red, Worldfire, impulse draw, and the festivities is already in exile, and you just slam it down and you win the game. That's pretty much the only combo in the deck, and it's not even a very good combo. Nobody's gonna get mad at you for this Worldfire, I promise. It's a little bit of a meme, but it's fun. And the festivities is also just good for, you know, dealing 1 to everything. That's what it does. Faithless Looting, draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards with flashback. Just getting through the deck. Net 0. Actually, it's technically card negative because you lose 3 cards to get 2, which is good. Fling. I put Fling and Thud, which is basically Fling at sorcery speed for 1 less mana. In the decks, just in case your things are going to die, which you don't really want, but you can make someone hurt or something hurt as a response. Never too bad to have these kinds of options. Hazoret's Undying Fury is another good target for Wildfire Eternal and Neheb to cast for free, because you shuffle your library and then you exile top 4 cards. You can cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost 5 or less from among them without paying their mana costs. So in this deck, that's pretty much everything that isn't a land minus like a couple spells. So you'll pretty much play everything that isn't a land. It comes with the slight downside that lands you control don't untap during your next untap step, but honestly, whatever. Here we have Bolt Bend, which costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which you likely do. Your commander, Hazoret, is one of them. And it then lets you change the target spell or ability with a single target. You get to divert some things, which is always a fun effect in Commander. Deem Worthy is a questionable removal spell that deals 7 damage to target creature, but it is a big flavor card. It's literally Hazoret Pointinger's spear at a little dude, deeming him worthy, and is gonna kill him. That's lore, baby. You can cycle it for 3 and a red to shock something too if you're not particularly thrilled by dealing 7 to target creature, but that does kill most things. Light Up the Stage is more impulse draw. It's better if you play this card after having dealt damage, which you likely will have dealt damage because it costs 1 with that spectacle cost, and you exile top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You can play those cards, including lands. It's good. Good stuff. Good impulse draw. Lightning Bolt. Don't need to explain this one. It deals 3 damage. Lightning Axe. Don't need to explain this one. It deals 5 damage to a creature. But there is also an added benefit. You'll probably want to choose that additional cost to discard a card as opposed to paying 5 extra mana. So, decent removal. Hit something in the face with a Lightning Axe. Fiery Temper is a Lightning Bolt, but only if you Madness discard it, which you'll be doing. Just giving you more options, opportunistic Lightning Bolt. And also that guy's on fire. Dangerous Wager, 1 and a red to just discard your hand, then draw 2 cards. This is one of the faster ways to just get rid of your hand. Don't need it. Put Hazoret online now, please. Dangerous Wager is a good card. Insult to Injury. This is a double-faced card with Aftermath, meaning you can cast the second part from the graveyard. The first part being 2 and a red to make damage unpreventable. You're not preventing it. If a source you control would deal damage this turn, it deals double that damage instead, which can just straight up kill people with commander damage or just like any amount of direct damage. This thing hurts. And then Injury is a shock to a creature and shock to target player. Just 2 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player from the graveyard. Both sorcery speed, so you're not really surprising anyone when you hit them with insult, but it does put people on edge because they don't want Hazoret to hit them for 40 million or whatever you're gonna hit them for. Past in Flames, all that cool stuff you've been doing with your instants and sorceries so far, do it all again, and then do it all again. We love to see it. We love to cast Lightning Bolt 3 times in one game in Commander. Seething Song, as I was saying, add a lot of red. We like to make red. Red gets us many places, gets a card out of our hand by casting it. Ritual effects are good in the deck. This is the only one I think, though. Shock, speaking of cards that are super good in Commander, it's Shock. Deal 2 damage to any target. Shocker. Sweltering Suns is 3 damage to each creature, with cycling 3 if you don't want to do that. This is a good effect. Like I said, kill the unworthy. Thud is fling at sorcery speed for 1 red. Just another fling effect. Tormenting Voice is another discard a card to draw 2 cards sort of spell. Deflecting Swat is similar to the Bolt. Whatever the one was that diverted the spell you choose. It's free now if you control your commander, which you probably do. She tends to stick around. She's indestructible. And you can choose new targets for target spell or ability. Great. Abrade, just deal 3 damage to target creature, more targeted removal, or destroy target artifact, which is also good. Anger of the Gods is similar to Sweltering Suns, except if a creature dealt damage by Anger of the Gods would die this turn, exile it instead, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. We like exile effects, so those creatures aren't coming back. And then Blasphemous Act, real simple. It's a really cheap board wipe if there are creatures on the field, which there will be. Deals 13 damage to each creature. Hazoret doesn't care about taking damage. That's why things like Sweltering Suns, Anger of the Gods, don't even phase her. She doesn't care. It's just damage. Alright, now that we have instants and sorceries out of the way, we can move on to artifacts and enchantments, which I believe is the last portion of this deck. Here we have Seismic Assault, 3 red for an enchantment. Discard a land card. Seismic Assault deals 2 damage to any target. Good to just pitch lands to. It's free after you pay the cost to get the enchantment. It's a good card. Shadow Spear, There's a handful of equipments in this deck that you're supposed to put on Hazoret. This one's pretty sweet because it gives her trample, which she likes, and lifelink, which you likes. And then you can pay 1 to make your permanents your opponents control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, which is also good because let's say they did have something indestructible or something scary like that. Now you can kill it by just paying 1 mana with Shadow Spear and then hit it with something. We love Shadow Spear. Great equipment. Speaking of good equipments, Tenzo, Goto's Maul. Long story short, it's 3 mana, equip 1 to give Hazoret basically, +3/+3, and trample. We know she likes trample. I'm not going to explain it any further. Trial of Zeal, questionable card. This is a flavor card for sure. 2 and a red for an enchantment that bolts something, and then when a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, you can return Trial of Zeal to your hand. The cartouche is not in this deck because it's not super great, but you know, it's a flavor card. Take it out if you want. I like it. World Slayer. We'll get into this one later. It's a good equipment, though, I promise. Blackblade Reforged is 2 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land you control, which is probably a lot if you've been on Top Deck Mountain for a while. Equips to a legendary creature for 3, and never equips to a not legendary creature because that is 7 mana that we don't have. Extraplanar Lens, you can play it and exile land you control, and now all lands of that type tap for double, which if you remember, our mana base is 35 fucking mountains, so they just tap for double now. Extraplanar Lens is good for that. Hazoret's Monument, literally a monument to our glorious commander. Red creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. That's great, that's awesome. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may discard a card. Great. If you do, draw a card. Sure. Great. Good card. Inquisitor's Flail is a great equipment to put on Hazoret because she's indestructible and does not care about taking damage. If equipped creature would deal combat damage, it deals double that damage instead, which is good. And if another creature would deal combat damage to equipped creature, deals double that damage to equipped creature instead. Oh no, our Hazoret, who's indestructible, is going to take double damage. We care. Molten Vortex is like Seismic Assault, but you have to pay 1 red for each land you discard, which isn't so bad. It's a lot cheaper to get on the field as well, which means it gets out of your hand faster. Ruby Medallion is 2 red spells you cast, cost 1 less to cast. Boom, baby. Get those spells out of the hand. Noom, noom, fast. Alright. That's every card in the deck. That's everything that this deck has to offer. And now we'll get into some fun stuff that you can do with the deck. So, like I said before, Burgi is one of the all-star creatures in this deck. Both these faces, as I said before, are really, really good. You want both these things. This isn't really fun stuff you can do. I'm just telling you right now, if you have Burgi, you're in a good place for this deck at least. Moving on, we have Neheb, the Eternal, and Wildfire Eternal. As I was saying earlier, make a lot of mana or free cast spells. And what do we want to do with those free casted spells and or a whole lot of mana we just made? Worldfire. Just blow it all up. Just nuke it all. I'm telling you right now, it's the most fun you can have for 9 red mana. And then onto the equipments, as I was saying before, just suit up Hazoret with a whole bunch of equipment and go beat down on your opponents. World Slayer, like I said, I'll get to it now. When a crypt creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. Well, that says permanents, not non-land permanents. That means everything that isn't indestructible is getting destroyed. And World Slayer. World Slayer sticks around too. You know who we can equip that to and who doesn't care about getting destroyed because they're indestructible? Hazoret. Do the math. Just wipe everything every time Hazoret connects. Hard for your opponents to rebuild. Basically a win con. There is a situation where you can get locked out of attacking because you draw cards you can't play. That's why there's so many discard outlets. Shouldn't be a problem. Basically a free win when you play World Slayer with Hazoret and can actually equip it. There's also like Soulscar Mage, like I was saying, with these non-combat damage effects, making -1/-1 counters. Blasphemous Act turns into an absolute nuke that just tragic slips everything it touches, except for your stuff, which is super good. Soulscar Mage also has prowess, so I mean, if you're popping off, you're popping off. And then lastly, you got, fun stuff you can do. Like I said, Bolt Bend, Deflecting Swat. People often underestimate how good it is to just like swerve spells and point them at things that aren't you or where you want them to. I personally like the effect, and I think it's pretty good for 1 red and for free sometimes. And that should be all. In summary, Hazoret is a pretty cool god from Amonkhet, and she makes for a very fun and relatively dynamic mono-red commander deck.